So you all set on your direct There you go.
I saw him back there. Yeah. All right. Hope everyone had a good lunch. And so now the major agenda item for the next 3 hours is to stay awake. Hopefully we can have some engaging conversation up here that will help with that. And yeah, so real quick before we dive back in, Carrie rejoined us. I had sent an email about the question that came up earlier. We don't need to solve this today, but her comment, sorry, I just deleted the email. Carrie, you want to share your comment on that one real quick?
So we are not precluded from requiring affordable housing, but if we do require it, the state law says we have to fully offset all costs to the developer of its affordable housing contribution in the form of incentives, like waiving fees and, or giving a density bonus, or that's what.
So it comes out of our pocket one way or the other.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we appreciate that. Any other questions or anything? Again, probably not, since it's pretty technical. But anything else for Carrie before we guess?
No, Carrie.
Oh, okay. So any objections with her returning to her regular life, and we'll again call her if we need to. All right, Carrie, you're off the hook again. Thank you. Strategy on. All right, Randy, you had other.
So back to transportation.
He just wants to dive right back in.
Well, I had the thought, and we got also included is the infrastructure, because yeah, we're not a big city, but these trucking agencies and stuff are using technology to make these deliveries, and if there's not infrastructure within the city for them to utilize their equipment, it's of no use to them or to us.
Talking about from like a 5G point of view?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cities that we're working with right now have taken the position that
About the coffee.
that broadband and 5G and everything is part of basic infrastructure, and they're really working to get ahead of it. So
Yeah, so if we're doing freight loading zones and there's no Wi-Fi available to these delivery people, how can they coordinate like a next delivery or,
right.
so,
Well, they're doing it through their phones, and they're doing other.
yeah, but
You know.
some of the reception is really bad
Okay.
in various parts of the city. So there's an infrastructure component to that also, that's the point I wanted to make.
One of the things from this, I guess the one thing from this morning that we didn't quite get to was the discussion about sort of communication and trust, and sort of setting a platform for community dialogue as a strategic thing, which I think really goes back to things that you've talked about in the recent past about just sort of public engagement and public inclusion and so forth. One of the things that I think we heard really significantly from the public that I think actually is in the process of getting solved, and I wanted Khalid to kind of give us an update on it, is I think that there has been a slowdown and a sort of a lack of transparency or access to information on the website, in part through different things that are being required with public websites today. As a, for instance, it's been an adjustment for, I think, everybody in the industry, the ADA requirements for websites, that anything that's put up online, has an option on it for people that are visually impaired, for instance. So everybody that I've worked with in the public realm, in the public sector, is scrambling to sort of reposition how information is put up in those platforms. And I know Sabrina's been working on that. But I also know you've been working to sort of roll out a whole set of other things that can let people have easier connectivity. You want to talk to that?
I'm glad you brought this subject up because I think it's very important. One of the goals for the commission and the staff is to have the public engagement, and we've been trying really hard to work on that in different levels. The first one is my goal was to reestablish and redesign the city website. So that kind of coupled with the ADA requirements. So a lot of the stuff that was on the original website was taken out because of the ADA. So we took that as probably as a push for us to look at the entire city website. Our PIO and our IT director and myself have been working really hard to do the redesign. Several goals out of that one is to make it user-friendly and make it as informative as possible. Right now, when you go to the city website, you have to go through several links to get to the information you need. So based on the hits that we had on the previous website, we kind of redesigned it where you'll be able to, for example, a lot of people wanted to get to the city commission, whether it's the audio, video, either the minutes, the agenda, they'll be able to do that. We have quite a few hits on, for example, parking passes. You mentioned about we charge for parking. It's a free pass, but you have to apply for it. So that's one of the biggest hits on the website. Right now, it's probably between 25 and 50% in terms of the redesign. And Monday, the commission individually, they had the chance to review some of the things that we have done recently. And I think what I heard from Phil, that it all was a positive feedback from the commission. And hopefully by February 20th, that will be launched. That's actually kind of in line with the state of the city event that we're having that night. So we're looking forward to get to that point where we have the website. We'll be able to put it out probably on a testing period where we could get the feedback from the public as well and make any adjustment that we might need to do. So we're looking forward for that one. We have a successful Facebook page. We use Twitter. We use the city website quite a bit to reach out. And then anybody who has give us his email or her email at some point within the last 5 years, if there is any information that needs to come out, that they will get it. For example, when we had the community meetings for this, for the strategic plan, they received an email through that process. So we're really working hard to get that out. Community engagement is one of the biggest items that we're looking for. So
two other things that, I raised this question to Khalid and Michelle and staff prior to this workshop because I think this was such a big discussion point in our public involvement meetings, earlier this week and Thursday of last week. And I was just curious, what's being done or where are we, what's going on? This is a big question. And so I get this huge download that there's this, giant upgrade to the website that's in process. So that was good news. There were a couple of other features, though, that I think we talked about yesterday that I want to also not lose track of. One is I guess there's a app being developed or that could be developed that would key into like a smartphone where you can click on things and always stay up to date. The other one that I know can be frustrating for folks is if you're concerned about a specific issue, and as I mentioned earlier, the public is overwhelmingly interested in things that have to do with growth management, i.e. development, and environment. If you're trying to sift through agendas and sift through things to sort of find where did they discuss what the conversation on a certain topic was, I guess the new minutes are going to have the ability to essentially bookmark or tab to agenda items. So if you're watching city agendas on the website and there's an issue coming and you're trying to track what the conversation was, the way that this will be documented in future will be that you can essentially go to the video feed and basically tab in the video, just like you're tabbing a bookmark, in a PDF file, or for those of us that remember books, like you would do in a book. Is that correct? I mean, that's
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anything to add to that? I think it's fantastic. I was really excited to hear that, so I wanted to share that.
with our mayor's efforts to bring people aboard, everyone aboard, IT-wise. I'm still concerned, and always have been, about people who can't afford IT and who are not
Right.
hip to IT. Half of my job is
Right.
on my phone. So, but there are lots of people in our community that don't even have that.
Sure.
Is there a way to provide, to give them information and share with them?
So that's a perfect segue, because I think there's two parts to this conversation. There's sort of the data sort of remote access suite of things, and then there's face-to-face interactions and word of mouth and actually going to where people are and that sort of thing. So I guess the question that I would have for the group is, are there things that you've done in the past that have resulted in more successful ways for face-to-face interaction or small group interaction at the neighborhood level? And I know that takes a lot of time and energy on everybody's part to do that.
In the past, we used to send the notices out, whether advertising in the newspaper, or at some point we even delivered door-to-door the notices if it's an important item that we wanted to discuss with a specific neighborhood. The problem with that is sometimes they're out of town, they're not at the house, and the meeting will be gone by the time they come back. So it didn't seem like it was successful no matter what we've done, whether we mail it, hang it on the door, or advertise it. So
How much does it cost to do like a broad-based physical mailer to the
I
city?
could tell you this,
lot.
we had a project just recently for the mooring fields, and we had about, I think, 500 residents. How much the cost was, Michelle?
50 cents a letter, so we have it in 2 meetings, so it's about $1,000 just to have 2 meetings to send out a piece of paper.
Just to send the paper.
It's only 500 people. We're not reaching
27,000? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at just the stamp, you're at 13.5 without any stock, card stock or anything else. I mean, it's extreme. Leveraging technology is. I hear you. I mean, that there will be, no matter what mode you use. I was just talking right before the meeting came back, and I've said this before. One of our struggles in this area of community engagement is, we have such a diverse cross section of demographic. You've got to hit everything from folks that strictly listen to AM radio, all the way through youth in the community that only are in front of their phones glued to TikTok, which is an app a few of you may not have even heard of yet. So it's like you've got this huge cross section that we have to cover, and we're not going to hit 100%. I mean, it's just not going to happen, and when we can't feasibly for the average thing. Now, certainly in emergency situations, we'll do everything door to door, whatever we can do, but for the average engagement, I think we have to go for value and the bang for the buck, and how do we get the most word out there. I'm very proud of what we've done this past year. I think not only our technology engagements, but our face-to-face. I mean, we held a town hall meeting in each area, or as close as we could get to the area. Certainly in your case, Commissioner Hartman, I think you couldn't get as far west as maybe you wanted to get, but we've done these town hall meetings where we've brought the elected and staff to the different areas and districts,
Right.
Which is unprecedented, I think, and at least for quite some time in this area. So I think our community engagement is trending higher. Can't track that over time, but would like to.
There's no. I guess I had a couple of thoughts. First of all, one of the things that I'm really ecstatic about the webpage, and I'm ecstatic about the email, essentially distribution library that you're building, because again, if you looked at the numbers and what people said when we asked that question, I think the overwhelming majority are comfortable with the website and the email. They're just frustrated because the website, for whatever reason, hasn't been, providing the ease of information or always up to date or whatever. And I think you have a great public information officer, really sharp guy. I think your Facebook page is great. I think the investments that you're making with the web page will be great. However, that leads to a question that I guess I've had is when you go to the public meetings, I know that there's groups of folks that enjoy those things. They go to those things frequently, and there's other folks that maybe just don't bother for whatever reason. And the question I would have is, have you thought about ever doing a statistically valid survey regarding community preferences across a whole spectrum of things that really would put the survey company on the hook using their sciences, which this is a science, how to do this, to really penetrate into the areas that don't always show up at the meetings. And that really cuts across all those other demographics that you're talking about. I think in many communities there's a small group of people that are the staunchest advocates for certain things, and they're the ones that are heard the most. And there's other folks that either don't feel like they have a voice, or they're not sure how to access, or otherwise we just can't, they just don't have time, or whatever it is. So have you ever talked about that? Or is there any validity to that sort of idea? Or would it not work?
I'll jump in and then I'll let the rest go. So I have thought about it. I think it's something that I heard somebody say one time they wish our commission chamber had 27,000 seats, because then it would give you a perspective sometimes of when the chamber's full on a particular issue, we're hearing that viewpoint, but it's certainly not it's not necessarily statistically significant or representative of the whole thing. And of course, we can't survey the community on every single issue.
Right.
But I think starting to establish a baseline, I think we're at a size. We're starting, having these types of forums, and what we had 60 people at the, we had two different things, net 60 folks, and probably 40 of those we could probably name off the top of our heads, and probably name exactly how they answered the survey questions, frankly. So I think we're at a point where starting to establish that baseline data with a statistically significant on a population 27,000, depending on what confidence interval you want. You're talking somewhere in the you got to be north of 1,000, somewhere in the maybe 5,000 at least responses for that to be statistically significant. So I think we're there. I'd looked at one before and I'm trying to find it. I think it's ICMA that does some surveys. Like, I'd like to be a company that actually does it. I don't think it's something we should do in-house. I think it's something we should have, but I fully support it. And they're cheap. It's not an expensive
They're
thing.
not. Yeah, they're not. Well, we have to be careful what we say cheap is, but
They're inexpensive and they provide
as
great
a point of reference, one of the practices that we have in our company is we do park system master planning for entire cities. We're actually about to start one for the city of Atlanta, and you can't get to every need for every user group in every neighborhood. It would cost $1 million to talk to all those people. So one of the tools that you use is a statistically valid survey, and I can tell you that for the city of Atlanta, a statistically valid survey that will cover all the parks and recreation needs for all the neighborhoods across all the demographics is going to cost $36,000. So you can determine in your mind whether or not you think that's a big number or a small number, but it's something that can be done, for say $20,000 to $30,000. It's not something that can be done for $100,000 to $200,000. It's not that kind of a study. It's a much more concise technical document that can be produced by people that do it for a living, and they really understand actuarial sciences and demographic sciences and all those things. And they know how to ask questions, and they know how to get to the right cohorts so that you can determine whether or not a particular opinion or thought or preference is really representative. So I don't know if that helps, but it seems to me like it would be good to sort of baseline the community on some key issues, particularly to the extent that we have a lot of things on this list. And I want to transition the conversation here in a few minutes to starting to work on some starter ideas for some of these big topics. We've got some things on this list that are going to cost money, and it is going to come back to budget. And the mayor mentioned earlier, if we want to, for instance, if you want to do a bond or something like that, money's cheap right now. So when you get down to making those decisions, it's really helpful to know where the full community really stands on some baseline things. And then from there, if you've got specific initiatives you want to do, you at least know where the baseline is, and you can do more research or not do more research.
Pete, if I may, going back to just your previous comments, have you seen a city or any other organization where they implemented some of these measures in terms of public participation, where they saw an increase from
Yeah.
where they start?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another, I think that's another thing that we could talk about in terms of actions or measurable goals, is I think if we could develop some thoughts about how to measure community participation by number of hits on a website, number of downloads, number of attendees at a meeting, for instance, if we know how many downloads or how many hits your city commission agenda is getting, and if we can make that number go up, it seems like an abstract idea, but that would indicate that there's more people that are having access to the information, and they're having the opportunity to review it and engage it and decide whether they want to participate or not. And so that to me would be a really useful, very simple thing to track.
It doesn't have to be physical.
It can be, yeah, it can be physical, but it can also be how people are participating on, your digital outlets, Facebook, whatever it is.
The sample city that has the great metrics that I keep referencing, I mean, that they track, all the social media engagements on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the website sessions and hits, Instagram, and they measure the year-over-year growth of the engagement. So.
On that subject, I think there would be a benefit in just tracking how many people do go to our various ways of giving out information. I'm not really in favor of the full in-depth study. I just, from my own experiences, just going through the neighborhoods, speaking with people, I see how their basic attitude has changed over the last year and a half. How no longer is there the undercurrent that there's no transparency. It seems that which was a really big hurdle a couple of years ago, has pretty much passed. We reach out everywhere. We can keep track of how much response we get. That would be good, but I really wouldn't want to spend a lot of money.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I like to put things in the ground.
Well, again, I'm just saying it's another tool.
Yeah.
You'd have to decide what kind of information you want to have, in terms of community preferences and those types of things. And then to me, it would serve as like a baseline. It's a data point along with other data points that you would take, including face-to-face interactions. And I would think it would be the kind of thing you would do maybe every other year, maybe every 3 years, just to track trends. To your other point, though, about just a sense of greater transparency, I would absolutely say that in our interactions in the public open houses, I think there was a very strong vibe of faith and hope for this council and for this staff. I think people feel like there's some great fresh voices and that there's access, and I think there's optimism. Now, we all know, that folks in this community are defenders of the faith on their key issues, and rightfully so. So some people are maybe in the skeptical but hopeful camp, and some are in the optimistic and hopeful camp, and some of them are in the I believe camp. But I think everybody is sort of facing forward and feeling like, yes, we need to watch this council and pay attention to them, because they're trying to do things and they're bringing new energy and new ideas to the city.
Well,
So
I get that feeling too.
I hope that.
But on the metrics, I think we capture a lot of data now police department does. They track from year to year. Fire
Mhm.
department does. We have records on
Mhm.
our usage at the ball fields and everything.
Mhm.
If we could come up with a way to turn that into a concise report,
Right.
I think that would be helpful.
So
I
let's,
think,
okay.
you know,
so-
it's just one last thing. You know, just my experience has always been, there's 10% of the people that really feel they have to monitor and follow the town and help. They're sitting here. They're at all the other meetings
Right.
too. And there's a group of people within that 10% that are really activists.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people, it's hard to capture their real feelings
Mm-hmm.
unless you really go out and you meet them randomly.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there's only 5 of us that really do
Right.
that
Right.
and can work with that information. So how to put together the data we had, I'm good with that.
Well, so let's talk. Can we? Because I want to talk about measures, and I want to come back. I'd like to take the balance of our time before we do public comment to talk a little bit about measures, things that we would like to measure, and start our ideas that we have for some of these things. So, talk to me. Can we talk about things that you collect data on or that you measure now that you think would be useful indicators of how we're doing on some of these subjects?
Well, I don't want to take all the time up, but I've gone through a bunch of them, but then you can add to that information the UC collects on our various usages of water. We can see what the trends are, as Commissioner Sachs was talking about, on water usage. So those are the organizations. You have the chamber. The chamber can give us information on how many contacts they have, and work with that. I know our manager has a good feel for what people are really looking for, and the ebb and flow of the public's interest. So finding a way to bring all that together would be very helpful.
Okay.
Pete, if you look at our maintenance op, there is quite a bit of measurable information out there, from recycling to service on roads or potholes or retention areas. Go into our development services, the measurable out there in terms of permits being issued, inspections, site plans.
So those are good. Those are good sources of what I would call sort of institutionalized or operational data within your departments. And I wanted to mention the Parks and Rec participation. But what about some things, if we think about sort of quality of life stuff, are there things that we could measure or somehow describe that that speak to the character of New Smyrna Beach?
Well, I want to go back to something the mayor
Okay.
said earlier, is with Facebook.
Okay.
Somebody says something,
Yeah.
other people comment,
Yeah.
and we don't respond with the facts.
Right. Okay.
I mean, if we did a better job of, through some way, saying, here's the project, here's what's going on, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then we could see the responses that come back would be a measurable way. I mean,
Mhm.
if that issue or that item drops off of Nextdoor or Facebook, then
Right.
people are getting information.
Right.
Or if there's more hits on, we actually get people requesting information on this project or that project.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that would be a way to measure it, I would think.
Correct.
You take the misinformation,
Right.
put correct information, and
So one of the ideas that someone had in the public open house, sort of beyond sort of the community newspaper, was sort of a fact sheet newsletter type of thing. That could be virtual, it could be on your website, or it could be something where you could very quickly get basic information on sort of the facts of the case, on things that are important. I guess I need to think of some controversial subject to figure out what an example of that might be.
One way we're seeing some communities do that is mapping, is where they host their own interactive web map, where you can then pan through your city and you can see where applications are active. And then you can click on that, get your application information. That's kind of like the for like OBT.
Yeah. So if you go on, I think I've said this before, but if you go on, I think it's the City of Winter Springs. If you go on their website, one of the top things is there's a map with projects, and it's not just projects like the one we're staring at here. It's all other types. So like the Beacon Apartments would be on there as well, and so somebody can by map. They say, what's going on there, what's happening on that site. They can click on that, and it will pop up, and it will give them all of the documents that we've reviewed, all of the site plans, etc., architectural renderings, so they can see not just what's happening now, which is the behind the scenes and the not so pretty side, but they can see what it will eventually look like. Hopefully, with all of the landscaping that we've required, etc., and it can help be a source of truth for some of the misinformation and help get us through, because nothing is pretty in construction, and that's one of the issues we deal with now. So yeah, I've advocated strongly for that, working with the website redesign and then the building department to take what now is this development. I think we have a development activity report that is produced. I think it's part of the way there, but if we could take all of that, digitize it, make it where we can truly link to it within in a web environment as a Facebook response, we could cut a lot of this stuff off and direct the conversation to things that really matter versus a lot of the misinformation out there that we spend so much time on.
So I want to agree with this conversation. I think that when we talk about technology, we get off on all kinds of different tangents.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that we haven't talked about with respect to technology is how we can actually solve a very specific problem, which is what's being discussed right now. Inaccuracies in social media.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably the most difficult thing to solve. And I know the mayor has mentioned this in the past.
Right.
And I agree. I think we need to take a very proactive approach, a new approach. And what you're describing that Winter Springs is doing is phenomenal, because we not only can respond to it, but we can link to it. So, I'm certainly full steam ahead in supporting something like that, and it wouldn't create. That's something, a short-term goal that will affect long-term,
Right.
that we can act on immediately.
Right.
One of you mentioned about the fact sheet newsletter. I could give you an example that this would work perfect with this one. When we did the Gateway project out there at 95 and 44, that was about $1.5 million. So people were criticizing the city for spending $1.5 million out there while we have some other projects, not knowing that the $1.5 million was a grant from DOT completely.
Yeah, it wasn't even your money.
So that type of the misinformation out there
Right.
that we could put in the fact sheets,
Right.
telling people where this money coming from, I think that would probably lessen some of the misinformation.
I mean, the technology for it is not a whole lot different from the story map that we used in our public meetings.
It's identical.
I mean,
it's the exact same
Right,
technology.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's a very worthwhile thing. But I also, again, I think the idea of the face-to-face stuff too. I think the town figuring out ways to do little town hall things that are useful is important. But I mean, there is a practical reality that it just costs an incredible amount of time and money to do the paper stuff.
But that's I think the point of this discussion. We each had town halls. Let's say we average 60 or 70 people at each town hall.
Yeah.
What we can reach on social media, everyone's on social media.
Oh, yeah,
not
for sure.
showing up to town halls
Right.
necessarily.
Right. Well, people have jobs and
Right.
Yeah.
So the point is, what's changed, our little economic development report that we get as part of a package,
Mhm.
that is completely outdated.
Yep.
And, I'm really regurgitating what the mayor's been saying. We have to change with time and technology.
right.
We got it. We understand what the problem is, and I think we have a solution to it. And
Yeah.
having town halls are great, and I
Yeah.
love having my
Yeah.
town halls.
Yeah.
But that's not the way we're reaching the people.
That's not the way you're going to hit it.
People are spending their time
Right.
on a computer, on social media, whether it's
Yep.
their phone
Yep.
or at a desk.
Yep.
And that's how we need to adjust.
Yeah.
So I hadn't gotten there yet because one of the things I was wanting to do in 2020, and this isn't necessarily strategic, but just to kind of lay it out there, is, the modern day town hall is more of a Reddit AMA and Ask Me Anything. So it's more of your CEOs, your leaders, they get on and just people can pop in and ask questions. Like that's what modern day town halls look and feel like, because it's you catch the people that are sitting at a red light interacting with their leaders versus this very formal, stodgy come to our meeting at 5:30. I don't have time for that. So now the nuance to all this we have to be careful of in this capacity specifically is. For all the great things the Sunshine Law is meant to do, one of the things it does is it makes it where we have to be extremely careful because it's easier to get in trouble with that than it is to follow it almost. And so that's the area we have to work closely with legal counsel to make sure we stay out of trouble on when we're trying to do too much social engagement and interaction. But I think there is a path forward that is reasonable and where we could start leveraging technology even more to have virtual town halls rather than just standing in front of folks. And record those and post them online. And there's many ways we can get there to, I think, broaden this. And if we measure that engagement as a benchmark, we have the rough attendance numbers from this year and the engagement we had this year. And if we tried some of this stuff next year, I think we would see, 100+% returns on increases in engagement.
And you're right with the Sunshine, when we individually start responding on social media.
Yeah.
But having a PIO
Yep.
that facilitates
Yep.
the stuff that we pass on the dais.
Yep.
We then facilitate out and people can respond to it, or we simply can provide a link. So I can respond without taking an opinion. If I see a discussion going on Nextdoor or on Facebook, I can simply post a link to the facts of that development project without saying anything, and that in itself can. And I can post it, and you can post it, as long as there's not a discussion on the issue. So I think we can make tremendous headway in dealing with reaching out to the people with something like this.
And this, to me, if we can do better at this, because I think we've made more progress. When I stand in front of groups and talk about all that we accomplished last year in some of these other areas, growth management and the stuff we do on the wetlands, and we've done some stuff.
Yeah.
That's just not out there yet.
People don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
the group, the 10% does. The group that's here faithfully does because they were a part of it. But the broader community doesn't. And so this is our chance to, some of these issues that are still perceived as issues, I think we could start crossing off the list in some ways.
Right, and the web page, in some ways, is archaic already.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of laugh and I say, at some point, web pages were very important. Every month I pay my business web page marketing fee. I laugh and I say, you know what? I'm not sure many people are even doing the web pages anymore.
Right.
So we have a great web page, and it's a great way for us to defer people to it. But we're already getting past that in the social media, is
Right.
where that is.
Right.
So we have to change with that.
Yeah, and I'm not an IT person, so I probably will only just say one little thing, and I'm quickly out of my depth. What I share that thought with you as a consumer. Actually, a lot of the links and things that I use are actually coming through social media or through Facebook or through other things that I'm connected to. However, when I think about warehousing large amounts of data that you can keep organized and have these platforms like the story maps and things like that, I think what inevitably ends up happening is you might access it through social media, and then you'll click on something and it will direct you to the website, which becomes the much more robust, diverse engine where you can hold all these really complicated things and video files that are tabbed and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's understanding how to deploy the whole network of those different things. But I was happy to see this morning I got on your webpage and there's our meeting right there, front and center. And then the screen slides and there's a thing about the Turnbull Creek group, and how to. So to me, like just to see that it's that real time is great. And then I hopped on your Facebook page. I thought it was, right on it. I really like your, so I think you're moving in a really good direction, and you just need to double down. And I think, again, the people that came to our public meetings, they're ready for that, and we're all ready to have the new website go live and everything. So.
And they enjoyed the story mapping exercise. I talked to several of your residents and asked them how they felt about using, we have this very large tablet that they were sitting there, dropping pins in for specific things, typing their notes in, and doing all these things. And we had that on a large tablet, but then we also had it on 2 iPads. So the people that were familiar with iPads are standing there doing it on their iPads, and the folks that maybe weren't as familiar are doing it on this, jumbo-sized tablet type screen we have. They were all doing this with pretty reasonable ease. And, these were mostly folks that were in their 50s and 60s.
Right.
So it's not I don't know that technology is maybe as much of a barrier as it may be perceived to be.
Yeah.
I think some of that is perception and some of it's real. There's a real component to it, and some of it's perceived. Because even the ones the folks I was talking to, like, oh yeah, that was so cool. It was so fun to be able to drop this in there and type my notes in, and I was able to show where my house was and zoom way in and zoom way out.
The demographics of Facebook has changed dramatically over the past few years. Most of us, it's parents and grandparents now.
Yeah, we're all dinosaurs. They're all,
Right.
Yeah.
But I know people in their 70s and early 80s that can teach me things on Facebook. So it has changed, and I think we need to embrace that.
Can we go back on the survey? Because I know I commented on it, the Vice Mayor commented on it, so we're at 50-50 split right now. So I think it's important to understand the view of the rest of the commission. I did find the one that I had looked at before, and this may not be the one you recommend, but it's through ICMA, I think, or they partner with the National Community Survey. Does that make it's so they collect data from a lot of different communities. You can actually not only just look at you, but I think you can do some comparative. From a pricing standpoint, you're talking about somewhere in the 10 to 17,000 range. 10 is strictly digital. 17,000 gets you up to 1,700 households actually mailing the survey, and then you also have a digital component, and then you have options in between. So. Curious what the rest of the commission's thought was on that survey thing before we move totally off of it. So I was a fan of saying yes. I think that's a component that we should start lacing into our strategic plan is a benchmarking survey of a broader, statistically significant broader community survey versus just relying on the 50 or 60 data points that we really get over and over again, which is the same 50 or 60 citizens. Vice Mayor's opinion was not so much, and just curious what the rest of the commission thought.
I like it. If you think about it, the historic West Side, that's how we've prioritized the senior housing. We did that based off of polling of what was most important. So I think we can get in trouble with getting too much information.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't have any problem with polling the community on issues. I don't want to. Sometimes you've got to just sit there and get the work done and start working on the issue as opposed to keep gathering.
Yeah.
But are you polling for information, or are you polling to see how they want to be polled?
No, this is polling on information. This is getting and depending on how we craft the survey, but this is actually like some of the same exercise we did in that forum. So what is important to you? Quality of life. What is the most important quality of life measure? Like those kind of things.
Support that, but
yeah,
it would have to be across the broad base of polling. Because the issue that I keep hearing on the historic West Side is we don't do Facebook. I'm not into social media.
So, and that's where this would be. They would be actually mailed out surveys. They basically they pull a random sample from an address list.
Right.
And so there would be, and I'm sure we could even curate that a little bit to make sure we hit a certain amount in each area, neighborhood, demographic, whatever that is. And yeah, these could be either digital or mailed out or some combination of both.
Yeah, the way this kind of polling is done is the folks that are conducting the survey don't stop until they've got a certain number of either hard copy responses or telephone recordings or whatever, so that they know that they've gotten some quantity of hard responses from whatever sub-district you want to identify.
And that would be difficult because I know during the resiliency meetings we had a lot of polling. We had a lot of people upset because they didn't think the polling questions or options that they were given accurately reflected their opinion. That was a
Okay.
big issue at one point with
Okay.
that. So
Well, you got to do a
I
good.
think
I'm not,
on the surface, yes, but let's not get. I don't want to go down the same road we've gone down in the past, and
Right.
then had a bunch of unhappy people after a lot of time and money's been spent.
right.
And we can get to that detail, but that's why I think having a larger partner that this is their expertise, and we could even follow, some kind of a template or something that's been done, so that we're not creating this, because then it kind of gets us out of that, that we've curated the survey in such a way to help predetermine the outcome. It's like, no, this is a survey that we can compare not only us but even to other municipalities that have done the same surveying. So, all right. So I think I heard two more that are in favor of some version. I see Jake shaking his head. So, all right.
Yeah, I'm just briefly, if we can expand our voice and expand what comes back in response,
Mhm.
it's always good. We've made great leaps. We're in another world now with IT helping out. We still, cost of ink and paper and stamps is expensive, but I want to reach as many people as possible. Because
Right.
let's say you have a capital project to help people's quality of life. You build it, and people go, "Oh, what'd you build that for? We really wanted this."
Right.
And
Right.
so and then I look at social media as now this new tool for me to gauge the public sentiment.
Right.
And I see misinformation and disinformation, and I can't really engage that way. I don't feel
Right.
comfortable doing it, and some do.
Yeah.
They give classes on it, but yet I, as a public official, hope that people call
Yeah.
me and say, "This
Yeah.
is what I want." So
Yeah, there's a great meme out there that says I changed my position on this topic because of what you posted on Facebook. Said nobody ever. So we've got about an hour before we want to get public comment, and what I'm thinking is I want to transition into some starter ideas for some of these categories. There's a number of starter ideas already written down, and we've got some right here that we've started on. What I'm wondering is a couple things. First of all, I took the conversation from this morning and I changed the categories a little bit, and I'm curious to know if you like the changes or if you don't. I'm happy to change them to something else or change them back. What I did is I consolidated a couple of things, and then I added a couple of things. So quality of life measures, and I think there are ways to actually look at indicators of quality of life. I think growth management is a broad topic, and it has to do with character, quality, and performance for the beach side, for the town side, for the far west side. I think environment and resiliency, I'm kind of putting those together. We really got into the coastal resiliency thing, but I think it's a bigger picture topic because it's not just sea level rise, it's the implications of sea level rise and flooding, and do we have the right stormwater, and then pretty soon you're into the wetlands, and pretty soon you're all the way out at 95. So I think it's all one big bucket. We talked about some public safety and community services types of things, and adequate staffing and adequate ability to deliver that stuff. So I think there's things there. We talked about attainable housing, and I want to keep that separate and discrete from homeless. I don't know if we want to make homeless a strategic issue or not, but it sure seems like it might be. And while housing is part of the homeless question, I think that's a different question from delivering market rate housing as part of the suite of things that are being put on the ground here in Newport Beach. And then transportation and circulation, which I think includes parking. We talked about that, and then the communication thing. Did I over expand it or under expand it?
My only suggestion would be I think homeless belongs under quality of life measure, and I think attainable housing belongs under growth management as kind of some bullets to those, but that's just my 2 cents. I'd see what the other commissioners thought.
There was something very nice about that earlier list, because it was...
I think homeless is one of those issues that's going to come up and slap us on the face and become a leading issue.
Okay.
I, for that reason, would like to see it on its own, but I'm not married to that.
I can support that because I agree with you, but But my worry is, and I've said this in previous years, I mean, you talk about, I mean, homeless, it's like, how do we when can we check that off the list? And it's like, how do we move that to completed? And the answer is probably that we can't.
I think the homeless is a short-term and a long-term
Yeah.
goal. That needs to, I think it's both.
And
I
so,
think we have a immediate homeless problem where we are getting a dramatic increase in, we're seeing some increases in petty crime, and so I think that's a short-term issue. The long-term issue is how do we deal with it from a county perspective? Public safety and services, always very important, but I don't see where that is a leading problem we have. We spent a lot of time since the economy rebounded in public safety in both fire and police, rebuilding all these staffing levels, new equipment. So of course it's always important, but that to me is not a leading problem that we need to tackle.
Well, we're talking about things, I think, too, is like, how do you want to define it? I don't think anybody would debate that public safety and services is a top-line item in terms of importance. Maybe, I think what I'm hearing you say is that what we're talking about here is areas of change or areas of new focus. And so I think that's an incredibly important subject, but it's not a leading edge area where we're looking to break new ground or try to steer the ship in a new direction.
Well, I don't think public safety is an issue. Nothing.
Well, I don't. Yeah. Okay.
So I think we have a
Okay.
very safe town. I think our crime reports state that.
Yep.
Support it. But
Okay.
I just don't see public safety.
Okay.
as being
I stand corrected.
What is services?
I think it can be community services. So I think it's anything from, programs that might be running over at the Bay of James.
Disaster preparedness.
It could be disaster preparedness. It could be services that might fall under Parks and Rec, things for seniors, things for community groups that need places to meet.
see, to me, all that falls under quality of life.
Okay, you put all that there. Okay,
And if it
I like
became an issue, if our metrics got out of place, if we saw crime spiking or we saw services declining, it becomes a quality of life measure, and then maybe it gets elevated to for that year, we got to make a strategic focus on infrastructure, capital, human capital investment to solve that issue. But until then, it's just a quality of life measure we're tracking over time.
Got it.
Steve, I think you should, you added communication and trust, and looking at it, seems like it should go on the top. Because if we have that,
Right.
we can get to everything else. We
Okay.
can start working on it, maybe better.
Yep. Okay.
But it's all semantics, but it.
Yeah.
And communication and trust has improved greatly.
Okay.
It's distasteful and sad that people don't trust their government. I look at us here, and I think
Right.
they should trust us. We're not the wisest, but we're trying. We're trying. I think we're trying. We don't agree on everything. But
Yeah.
all those other things we're working on.
Yeah.
Public safety, we're getting there.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with Jason. Services, we're losing services.
Mm-hmm.
The public aid assistance to veterans, I understand, left us a $4,000 hole they didn't want to fill and just picked up and left. So
Mm-hmm.
provide that mental aid, that for
Mental health. Right.
uh,
Right.
in your compassionate city
Right.
that compares, that
Right.
cares.
Right. So, would it help if I just delete those couple things really quick so we're not looking at them and get distracted? I'll do that.
Sure.
Let's do that. Let's take a second. I already took a photo of the screen, so I know.
Do you have a thing to clean glasses with? No. Do you have one to clean glasses?
Yeah, we should.
Yeah. I know.
Okay, you don't want to say that?
Do I?
Okay. So,
License to carry a pocket knife.
so I think, what's that?
I'll bring it back to you in a second.
Real quick. Regarding the communication and trust, I was just talking to Colin about our new agenda management software. We have our kickoff meeting on the 31st of this month. So they'll be deploying it soon, which means for the people that want to go on our website to pull up the full agenda packets and the minutes, they'll be able to do that
Great.
shortly. And it'll be a lot user-friendly where we have a state of our agenda management. It uses
Right.
the same JavaScript technology as Facebook
Mhm.
was built on.
Great.
So that also means that when they deploy new products, it's going to be lightning fast for us to get them.
Right, perfect.
So.
Okay, so speaking of lightning fast, let's, what I'm interested in, if this is sort of the list, and there are a lot of thoughts and starter ideas here. Unfortunately, I'm the only one that can see them because I'm trying to kind of manage what we're talking about here. Can we go through these points and talk about either an action, I'd like to call it a starter idea as opposed to an action, because I don't want people to feel like if I say we should do this, then we've decided once and for all. I'd like to put up a bunch of ideas about things that we could do that might be candidates for action. Or if there's something that we think we would like to measure. So as an example, on communication, we've got some really good starter ideas about the initiatives that are already underway, the city map idea and looking into the winter-spring thing, the virtual town halls idea, the statistically valid survey idea, and we also know that there's probably some ways to measure that in terms of hits, participation, and downloads. So can we talk about some of these other categories in that way? And I think anything that anyone has on their mind as a starter idea for an action is fair game.
You're looking for low-hanging fruit?
Sure, I am. Yeah, I think low-hanging fruit.
I've always harping on the AOB site.
Mhm.
We're gonna grow. Our public space, we just bought, $9 million worth of land, hopefully just a trail going through it to recreate. But I still don't think, I also said quality cities are measured by their parks. But the AOB can be, something saved and held as waterfront access for the public. I don't feel that Riverside Manatee is adequate waterfront access for our public, because we're going to, if it's 1.6% rise in population in 5 to 10 years, you're going to see 10%, 20%. So plus the visitors, we're going to want a place to recreate.
Mhm.
I still think AOB is something we need to try to improve. Not so much with just the marina.
So as a measurable to build on that, I would say park acreage that's actively maintained, so just the aggregate number, and then park acreage per 1,000 people. So if we knew that, hey, our goal is to have 10 acres of park per 1,000 people, just make it up a number. I don't know if that's the right number. Then we can actually say, are we running at a deficit and we should be focusing on adding, or are maybe we have too much, which is costing us money and time and staff, et cetera, and we need to, we can settle down on that. So that would be two measurable points for that.
The other thing is location of those parks.
Yeah.
Are we
Yeah.
serving 20% of the people with
Yeah.
80% of our parks?
Right. So there's a lot of cities that have adopted the half-mile goal. Now, these are generally bigger cities than New Smyrna Beach, but you might want to do a quarter-mile goal. The goal goes like this. Every resident of your city should be within a quarter-mile or walking distance of a public open space or a park. So you could, and maybe that's a little bit too abstract of an idea to just lay on you right here, but I think there's actually things like that you could think about.
Yeah.
And I think when I think of, I think that is to me that is a fundamental thing to New Smyrna, back to the top of the meeting, is, why are we here in the first place? Is because there's all these different ways that the natural environment presents itself in this part of the world. And the idea, whether you can afford the expensive home on the beach, or the slightly less expensive home that's not on the beach, everybody has a way to access that environmental presentation. And I think that is important.
Let me give you the flip side of this coin. When the economy tanked and we just didn't have any money, what became very apparent is the incredibly large number of parks we have in the community. Now, granted, most of these parks were created in a 50s, 60s, 70s era mentality. Where we have these little parks around neighborhoods, which is great. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Problem is, people don't use 80% of them.
Right.
So when we say we have all this open park space, it's a tremendous cost to maintain all these parks. We thought about possibly closing them up or selling them off. We just had a discussion about it because you would be amazed when you took the inventory of how many little parks we have, and they sit idle all the time. So what does the park do? Are the park meeting the needs of the people of today?
Right.
So that is the much bigger issue.
This is why cities do parks and recreation master plans, is to, every 5 years to 10 years. No, I didn't mean that as a pitch. What I mean is, I'm being totally, it's a very complicated topic in terms of the programmed use of the parks, the cost of the O&M for the parks and recreation facilities, and the needs and evolution of the community is something that constantly has to be recalibrated. So your point is correct. Again, we're not going to solve the whole world of parks today, but I think the idea of thinking about looking at strategic sites for public open space, particularly when it's in a water setting, and finding a way of measuring the quality and quantity of parks.
And if we should have, you look at Edgewater, and you got to give them credit. I mean, the Whistle Stop Park they just developed is really fantastic. I mean, my family's been down and spent time in that facility. And that approach there is, but that's basically like the park in Edgewater, versus in New Smyrna we have all of those same assets but spread across a lot of smaller parks. And so, is that the approach? Should we get away from some of the neighborhood, the pocket parks we've talked about, and have larger parks, so that are easier to maintain?
I like the name strategic park because it implies that there's a specific thought put into it.
Yeah.
So referring to the AOB site as a park space to me has not a great connotation because, number one, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And do we need another swing set on the AOB site? I don't think so. But a strategic park meant for some kind of use that the entire community can use as waterfront, now that's interesting. And that sounds a lot better than another park which may or may not have a swing set. That doesn't get used, rots.
Right.
One person complains about it. We replace it.
Right.
2 people use it for its life.
Right.
Perpetuate that system.
Right. Okay.
Jason a long time ago brought up the thought that we have all these tiny parks, some don't get used, cost a lot of money for parks. Now the paradigm has changed. We're growing and probably expansively in the next 5 years. That I would want to measure that. How many parks should we have? My dad lives in a wealthy community. He's not wealthy, but he lives in a wealthy community with big giant skyscrapers, but pocket parks everywhere.
Yeah.
Every one of those pocket parks is used. Not so much for us. Maybe out west off of.
Because we have one giant park that runs the entire coast. So I think that sucks up a lot of our recreational activity. And we don't have folks coming out of skyscrapers. I mean, my kids live in a park environment. I mean, a lot of our western development is rather rural. So, I mean, it's a different demographic. That's where, I don't know the right number on either of those measurements, but I think just tracking that and seeing how we stack up against, we can look at some other communities, like, I can tell you what Winter Park's number is right now. So we can see, I'm very curious on just those numbers. Like, are we overparked already, or are we under?
I think, as I recall, we did this.
Yeah.
We were overparked in a lot of ways. Now,
You may be overparked and underprogrammed.
Yeah, well, overparked and underutilized.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. You have a lot of land, but there's not much happening in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly what it shows.
Yeah.
So, I'd expand this, just going a little further on some other metrics in this, quality of life or whatever category you're putting this in. But, we have a lot of other space that's not park space. We have a lot of other community civic type spaces. The Women's Center, the Brandon Center. What is the utilization on those? What kind of events are they hoping, the number of rentals, the number of visitors, public versus private use, those kind of things. I think those are all, the golf course, I think, would fall under that. Tracking those metrics for each of those is something I think that would be important. And again, we have all that. It's just aggregating the data.
But please don't forget the opportunity for an aquatic type park for the maritime community, for the, see all the paddle boards come, steps, stand up, and kayaks, and they're relegated to Calarisa by an outfall. And
Yeah.
it's just a dirt track for people to park, so hopefully you guys will agree. We need to set aside a little more space for waterfront access, not just our city boat ramps. It'd be a shame, that waterfront loop should be a little bit waterfront, shouldn't it?
Okay.
Just saying.
We talked earlier about sort of attainable housing types of things. I'm wondering if there's a way to measure housing within some certain percentage of median income.
Yeah, we can do that. Well, anybody can.
I mean,
do that.
yeah,
The
yeah.
census collects that data on
Right.
percent of household spending on housing costs.
Yeah.
So there could be, we could, I think strategically, we know that we want to be positioned that there is attainable housing in New Smyrna Beach, and that is going to probably come in some different forms. That's a very complex set of issues, but I think it's one that needs to be engaged. And then you can measure how you're doing.
That might be something you can track with some market data that shows you what home sale prices are averaging for price per square foot within the city to see if, and you can look at that by district, you can look at that by a broken down grid system so that you can look at the areas of the city a little bit more closely. Because it's not just so much, if there's no attainable housing in the city, then you wouldn't have a high percentage of people paying over 30% of their household income towards their housing because those people are living elsewhere.
Right.
So that it may not show you, it may say, oh, look, everybody who lives here pays less than 30% of their income towards their housing expenses.
Right. So maybe a question for the group
Give a
too is,
number, yeah.
do we think this is a top line issue, or is it a quality of life or a growth management issue?
Well, let me answer it this way.
Okay.
Everybody hates coastal woods. And right now,
So I've heard, yeah.
So right now, we have our affordable housing is coastal woods at about 200,000,
Yeah.
225.
Yeah.
But everybody hates it. When you talk about, and I talk to people, I say, well, what do you not like about it? The aesthetics, the design, everything they want to change about it means that home at 2.25 is going to go up to 3.25. Takes
Right.
us out of the affordable housing that everybody says that they want, or attainable housing that they want. Isles of Sugar Mill. There's a number of different communities that I keep hearing from people as the growth happens out west, we don't like. But yet, that's the discussion that I think that we really need to have. That's the meat and potatoes. If we
Right.
want attainable housing, and I like that word because I always gripe about affordable,
Right.
then are we going to approve an Isles of Sugar Mill? And are we going to approve a Coastal Woods?
Right.
Then we say, well, how do we approve it? Well, there's property rights and land development regulations that we have to abide by. So the answer to that is we're going to make the land development regulations that Mike talks about more stringent
Right.
on when you build a home. That's how you control that. But then we completely get away from all the, quote, attainable housing. That's the discussion.
Okay, so let me so now, I'm thinking out loud, and probably my mind is going to be ahead of my mouth here, but I agree with all those points. I would validate all those points. Maybe a twist that I would put on it is to say, is it the house itself, or is it how much of the discussion is the house itself versus the community infrastructure that's being built in and around it?
Property
And
Well-
what I'm wondering is if that's a way to engage, because if the market wants to, we did a significant piece of work recently in another high character community that you've heard of, and it was exactly this issue. The developer, a production builder wants to come in, they want to do the zero lot line houses with the garage in front and the front door in the back and the whole thing. And we were able to do some things with that community to adjust the land development standards, work with the Home Builders Association, get some trade-offs on the housing standards themselves to try to improve the visual character of the housing development. But the other part of the discussion is actually, it's okay to live in a modest home. There's nothing wrong with that. The question is, are we building community out there, or are we building disconnected tract housing?
Yeah, well, the answer to your question is yes, everything. Now, I can give a local example, which is Florida Days. It's a popular builder in town.
Okay.
Who does a beautiful community, relatively high density, close to each other. Not high density comparison. A lot of houses are close to each other. The streets are wide. They can accommodate parking out front. They have some parking out back. But the point is, when you go from a coastal woods type development to a Florida Days type development, which everybody loves the aesthetics of, the cost to build that development is much more, and that home goes from $225 to $325 to $425. So that's the challenge. Everything you said is the challenge that this commission needs to sit here and try to figure out.
So I actually think the attainable housing thing is maybe part.
Real quick, Commissioner Harves was trying to jump in. I just want to make sure he's heard.
Habitat just built a whole block full of Habitat houses in Edgewater.
Mhm.
They're appraised at $230.
Yeah.
They're more expensive than coastal woods.
Yeah.
And,
But that goes to my point earlier when I mentioned earlier that production home builders that I know will come to me and say, we cannot deliver the $200,000 house that a starter salary needs to buy. That's the challenge.
One element, and this is where I thought you were going earlier, is everything else we just talked about, all those quality of life measurements, the parks, the waterfront parks we want to provide, all these other elements. That makes the price of dirt more expensive. Before the first home, so we could be talking about a container home, and you're not getting, in my neighborhood, I bought a property last year, and it was $100,000 per acre is what it's going for in the neighborhood I live in. So at that point, no housing. I can't hardly put a trailer on that and it be affordable housing from this, or attainable housing to a certain demographic. So, that's where I go back to saying, can a community be all things to all people? Everything we're doing is making the underlying real estate more valuable. We're building an asset, the product we're putting on the field. That's why I say the product of New Smyrna. Before we do anything, the dirt is valuable because of its proximity to the coast and all the other amenities that we have that we've put in place. So, at that point, we start talking about trying to subsidize. That's the only way you drive that cost down is some kind of a subsidy program. So I don't have an answer. I just want to make that comment.
And the more we stop, and I want to make sure that point hits home because you're 100% right in my opinion. And the more we make New Smyrna, the way we talk about and we hear from our constituents, the bigger demand there is to live here, which then increases. So it's self-fulfilling.
It's a self-fulfilling problem.
But it's a great problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, yes.
And then we go back to when we have discussions and we start talking about the growth of the community, and the first thing I hear is, using your word, attainable housing. And I say we got to disconnect because we can't be all things to everybody. New Smyrna is very small, and we simply don't have the land to continue to accommodate all that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to have candid conversations on the commission. We have to have candid conversations with our constituents and tell them, when they start talking about something like attainable housing, okay, well, what is that to you, and can we or can we not achieve that for you? And depending on what that constituent tells me is their idea of affordable housing, I may have to tell them, I'm sorry, but I don't think we can accommodate that. And here's why.
Yeah.
But the conversation we need to have, the meat and potatoes needs to be done at the staff and commission level so staff has a direction to go on
Mhm.
on policy, land development regulations. Because we can make $200,000 homes affordable here, but we're going to then take our land development regulations, throw them out, and drop them dramatically.
Right.
And
Right.
what we hear from the constituents is increase the land development regulations,
Right.
which makes not only the cost of homes go up dramatically, but the cost of doing business here.
Now,
Okay.
I disagree. You can change regulations, but it doesn't necessarily drive up the cost of the housing.
Okay.
It
How so?
can be done.
Tell how so?
Oh, as I was speaking, you could have cluster housing, and you could preserve a piece of the land. You could change your lot line sizes. You could, as was zero lot line things. There are ways to do it to have more affordable housing constructed. We have neighborhoods that right now have a lot of substandard housing in them. Maybe we should focus some of our housing construction in those neighborhoods other than just the ones which we now use. I'm not that fatalistic on the approach of working with the regulations.
Well, I'm more than happy to sit down with you and let's work through those issues.
Good.
'Cause I would love to solve that problem.
You have to wait till the sun shines out.
Or wait till
but I-
everybody falls asleep and then we can.
But I think what I just heard though is, I mean, the items you brought forward, you said, yes, we can get there because we can, the zero lot line and the this and that. But again, to Commissioner McGurk's point, I mean, you stand in front of the community in the town hall and, show of hands, who wants to see zero lot line developments in New Smyrna? Zero hands go up. And so that's all right, one hand goes up. So that's the crux of the issue. And that's where I think maybe it is the communication. So we help folks understand, we're going to have, if we want attainable housing, then this is how we get there. So I mean, I hear you, but I still think there's a disconnect between what the two of you said, in that,
But I
yes,
think
that's how you get
The
it.
best debate we've had all day is so.
You can go into, and we've really been dragging coastal woods through the mud here, is if
Okay.
that was planned a little differently, you could have the same number of houses and a better neighborhood environment out there. Because our way of looking at these things has evolved over the last 10 or 20 years.
Right.
And remember, those were set up in that time frame.
Yeah,
Right.
eons
So
ago.
there's better ways to do it.
Right.
So I think it's worth pausing, just me personally. I mean, this is already, I can't pull you outside and talk about this. So this is my chance to pick your brain on this. So, I mean, let's go to the next layer on that. I know it's a little bit detailed, but this is important.
Okay, when we talked about expanding our list of projects, or list of focuses, I had actually made mine a little bit smaller.
Okay.
I had included the growth management, quality of life, and when we went into the beach town western land, into one, because they're so totally connected.
Right.
They have to be really worked together.
That's why I put them in one, actually. I did Little Beach Town and West.
Yes,
Well,
well.
yeah.
He's saying he had growth and quality of
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah.
Use my pen and-
Well, okay, well, we're on the same page then. Yeah,
Yes,
good.
Exactly. But our regulations are really out of date.
Okay?
Now, we have the same basic guideline we've been given. It's basically density. We can't really reduce the density that's allowed now.
Because then it's a
Because we
taking.
will get sued.
Yes, yep,
Is
got it.
what would happen. But we can adjust our standards as to how they all fit together to make it a more attractive and a better neighborhood.
So when you say adjust
without
standards,
increasing the costs.
so when you say adjust standards, what I think is architectural, I mean, I've been preaching this for a little while, architectural standards, not the zero lot line, not the garage within, 6 steps of the street, those type of things. So what is, when you say increase standards, what do you mean? Because all those things I just said do increase the price of the home, I think, but again, I'm not an expert, so.
Well, when you start congealing the actual development
Yeah.
itself, you're reducing the amount of infrastructure that has to, first of all, be paid for by the developer.
Correct,
and
yeah.
maintained by either us or the utility
Right.
commission.
Yep.
So you work towards things like that. Now, I did, when we were looking at some particular thing in the back, the wetlands density, there was a PUD that was proposed, never built, on the very west side of the town, south side of 44. And I looked at that and I said, damn, this looks like it would be a good thing to build. Because it had little townhouse sections. It didn't have the commercial because they don't have the mass for that type of thing. And it did have some open space that's usable by the public. And it did have natural features to be protected. It can be done. This gentleman over here, he knows that it can be done. So you're right that it may annoy some of our residents because how we think the town should be developed, but that's a price that I'm willing to face and make those decisions. You go back, you look at our old areas that we so love, the beach side, Zone 4, Zone 2, Zone 1. You look at Magnolia and all them. Just think what the densities are in those areas. They're really quite high, and yet they're livable neighborhoods. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I mean,
density. I think moving beyond density conversations and getting into conversations about form.
Yeah.
And the form comes in two flavors. One is the form of the building and how the buildings relate to other buildings, and then it's the form of the public realm. And the first question would be, is there a public realm? And the second question would be, how does it function and how's it's connected to other things to actually create community? I think, architectural style, there's plenty of things that I can look around in this community or in any community and say, well, that's not beautiful, or this isn't the style that I would have chosen. So I think to a certain extent we can manage and regulate some aspects of style to the extent that they create function. So I mean, when you put a driveway in the front and the front door in the back, you have affected the social interaction of that community. So to me, there are form things that you deal with in terms of the way buildings and homes and whatever they are is configured, but whether something is a certain density and like I said before, I think the tree line is an important height. You make a big decision when you decide to go above the tree line. If we're talking about things that are below the tree line and have a good form relationship to the street and connect to a public realm idea that somehow links back to the natural environment in a thoughtful way, I don't care what you're building. I'm good.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
we can't deal with the density. We
Yeah.
don't want to deal with the density.
I mean, you need to know what it is because it's part of somebody's land use rights, but I just think it's an abstract concept that people get wrapped up in without understanding the form and function of what the actual product is and how it builds neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Right.
I think, so we got about 5 minutes until our next kind of scheduled break, although it looks like we got about a 15-minute buffer, so we can take a few extra minutes. But I think I'd love to have another 3 hours just to kind of bat this back and forth. So I'm not, we're not going to get all the way through it, and I know we got more to get through, but so go ahead.
But how do you regulate that? You can put the regulations in place, and you can require setbacks or this or that or the other, but if it's my property, I want to build what I want to build. I don't want to build what you want to build. I got to make a profit on it.
So we can regulate that.
And
Yes.
and that's a discussion. Okay, what I would like to do with that, I fully appreciate your comment. To answer that question, we got to get into tactics. So what I would say is let's jump back up to the strategic level and say that there are fundamental quality of life issues that are intrinsic to New Smyrna Beach. And they have to do with environment, physical form, and social and physical connectivity that lead up to a physical sense of place and a social sense of place, and hopefully an economic sense of place, because you have, right? And we need to engage those issues in different ways on the beach, the town, on the west, and particularly on the west, our intellectual hardware is probably behind the times. And I'm not saying anything is perfect on the beach or perfect downtown, because it's not, but those are areas you've been working the problem for several decades. This west thing is a whole new thing, and it's happening right now. And I think what has come out of this discussion is a renewed interest in engaging that area across several bandwidths, and one of them is design standards. Does that make sense? Is that fairly characterized?
Question, I was laughed at when I said building heights should be the height of trees or less. And then I was criticized because they said, well, you're just going to spread out the density and make it a further, larger footprint. But
Okay.
I still say, wherever you go and you look at those beautiful, you can see a Claremont everywhere around here, Longwood, trees. You don't see many large buildings. We should build like that. I was so pleased when I was dreaming about conserving wetlands that our planning staff, our planning board, thanks to Mike and Sandra, were actually trying to figure out how to save half of that as wetland, reducing the density, saving the water. The important things we are starting to do. But I'm still very concerned about covering up more with concrete, that we figure maybe there's something additional Mike can figure out for us how to.
No pressure, Mike.
Yeah, no pressure.
Give me a piece of
But can you do it by January while we take a break?
Responsible growth, I've always
Right.
said, are oxymorons.
Right. Right.
But we can do it.
Yeah.
So,
It's hard.
building off of that really quick, something, it's kind of a tangent, but parking, we talk about parking requirements, and certainly there's areas where we have parking deficiencies. However, as you look forward and talk about changing transportation scene, I would love to see us as we think of, new growth, especially new commercial. I think we should take a hard look at our parking requirements. If you look at, take a development like the Walmart out west of 95, most of that asphalt blacktop is unused for 80% of the time. So we've created this they call them heat islands that are created when you take that approach. And the University of South Florida has just done a fantastic job. They've done a tremendous amount of research around this heat island effect. And when you eliminate all that blacktop and you pull back that parking requirement to what is a more reasonable requirement for that facility, you can eliminate that blacktop. So,
You're going in dangerous territory.
I-
Pulling back parking.
but I'm saying
Well,
it's very different. It's very different than downtown. I mean, because out there you only have parking issues twice a year: Black Friday and the day before.
Well, I want to talk about Black Friday for a second, because I'm right with you. And I'll tell you, we all remember Black Friday and the tradition of Black Friday. And, I went out on Black Friday this year, and I was on some big corridors. I needed to go to a couple places that were in some shopping centers. And, there was just nobody out. There was just nobody there.
Because it's ebbed into. It starts at Thursday at noon now, and
Well,
so
it starts
spread out.
it starts Friday before Black Friday,
Cyber
and
Monday.
it's all online. So in other words, there's a phenomenon. The audience is getting wild. There's a phenomenon. Let me just give my 30-second soundbite on this. There is a phenomenon going on in the retail world that has to do with this online shopping, that has a lot of maybe negative consequences, but I think it has a big positive consequence for character towns and independent main streets. It's going to be the salvation of independent main streets. And it's this. And there's no retailer speaking expert out there that to some degree isn't also going to say what I'm about to say, which is that the today's shopper, buyer, customer is looking for an experience.
Yep.
Because when you can when you can sit on your couch and click on your phone and get anything you want delivered to your house within 24 hours or less, why would you even go outside at all? The reason is because there's something unique, there's something authentic, you're going to see other people, and there's going to be an experience. And so those malls are in my opinion, in the grand scheme of things, those strip centers are in a lot more trouble long term than your two main streets.
You're gonna see that.
1,000%.
I really believe that.
Canal Street's revitalization with shops like the
Right.
Flash Pineapple, yep.
Right.
You got people, exactly. And no one's putting up targets.
Nobody's putting up, right.
You ask Glenn Storage, when are we getting a target? He'll laugh at you and he'll say, you're not building anymore.
They'll say 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're getting,
But
Yeah.
what we need to think about, though, planning-wise, is now you have all these vehicles coming. You have all these Amazon
Yeah.
trucks all over town now that we didn't used to have since they built their distribution center. Maybe they need to build a mini center somewhere
Maybe, yeah,
outskirts
maybe.
to where they could reduce the number of single vehicle
Right.
traffic within the community.
It'll be drones before too long, so it'll be fine. Just-
They'll be crashing on us, our heads, we'll have to have.
Other kind of starter ideas or things that we'd like to maybe measure.
So from a measurement, I will put all my measurements on the table. I've shared with you all the document. I don't think there's much missing from the example that I provided, which happens to be our neighbors down in Winter Park. I think they've measured just about everything I can think of to measure, at least as a starting point. Maybe a few of these don't apply. They've got a lot of utility stuff that we could probably, I'm comfortable leaving that in utility space. But as far as measuring and even some of the other starter ideas, it's all kind of summed up there, so I'll leave it there for me.
Okay.
But I think that's important, the utilities part of it.
No, I agree.
Because we get questioned about it, and, it comes before us.
Completely agree.
So I think those are things that we partner with them and say, can you provide this information? So that it's a part of the public record.
Yeah.
Because most people don't know that we're two completely separate entities.
Agreed.
So, I think those measurements.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just saying, like, as far as the collecting them and all of that, like, they're doing it. All we have to do is just basically snag it and drop it on our report. And I actually think they're doing a pretty good job of reporting on it now.
Yeah.
So all we have to do is just kind of leverage it. But I agree with you. In fact, as part of the website redesign, I asked if we can connect with the UC, because people go to City of New Smyrna to pay their bill. I want them to be able to do that. Not that we get in the middle of it, but punch out to the UC. So anyway, I'm done.
Others?
Do you think in 2 generations or maybe one, I won't have to worry about people that don't have connectivity, that will have
Yes.
died off and
Yes, yeah.
everybody will have that,
Not
hooked up and I know what the city's
within
doing.
10 more years, Jay. I mean, it's not 2 generations. It's within 2 weeks. I mean, it's coming.
I know it's
Yeah.
exponential.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But I hope we can conserve our earth. Yeah, something I got to share with you guys. Mike, this is for you too. Our habitat.
didn't know it was exploded
Mike understands more. He is an environmentalist and a planner and an engineer. Is that right?
Yeah.
These, what I know, and please, if you don't agree, look it up. We need corridors for life, for those things that can't speak for themselves, for animals, for trees, and they need to be connected. If we can still do that, we can't have pockets, islands of trees. We need connectivity, and if you look at many areas of the state, there's no connectivity. Those colonies of ecology, biodiversity die if we don't try to have that vision.
I need to go off on a tangent. I want to make an example.
This is a tangent of a tangent?
Yes, we're doing that, and I'm going to give you the example.
This is for you as well.
You look at a big piece of land, and it has natural topography of where water runs, wetlands, and how water drains from the property. Part of that smart growth strategy, aside from clustering, was to make sure that these large parcels of property continue to operate for wildlife habitat and water. So the big piece of property gets divided up, you get 2 separate developments. Well, when you develop it, you maintain that natural flow of water through both developments and even into a 3rd and 4th development out to a rural area. We have somebody in one of those developments screaming and complaining that another development next to them has their water going into her neighborhood. And it's supposed to by design. That is being missed by the debate. And we have someone who, I have over 100 emails from them. They can't understand that we're doing exactly that. And that person is very upset, saying the other development stormwater is ruining her neighborhood, when all they did is a lot of experts and engineers, both with our city and private ones, made sure that those wildlife corridors, the water, and the wetlands were maintaining that natural flow. So we're doing some of that, we are. And then the irony is we're having people who don't understand that living in those communities saying we've ruined the neighborhood due to water. So I just wanted to point that out.
I agree with you. I think we are trying to get to that better goal. I think what may have happened, and that's for our engineers and planners to look at, do we have the adequate capacity for water throughout? Like, if there's a natural drainage, we have a community, its drainage goes to the outfall. Then another community gets built, hopefully with a little bit of barrier. Can they sustain?
It was brought up earlier.
Yeah.
The rising seas are ultimately going to give us the biggest problem because all that water eventually goes out to the river. And as the river rises, it doesn't have anywhere to go. So that is, the right.
Yeah, it seems like, I was going to mention the coastal resilience and the stormwater issues that we were talking about earlier. It seems like I want to put sort of two ideas on the table, just philosophically. One is that we need to have connected systems. And the other is we need to be making places that have multiple benefits. So I think that if we have a stormwater area, we should understand how it connects, and we can make it something that also creates recreational open space, even if it's passive recreation, creates environmental habitat, and also creates real estate value. And I will tell you that as a Midwestern guy who didn't know anything about Florida, when I moved here in 1990, I actually study Florida because I'm still learning about Florida. And, when I came to Florida, the aesthetic of how you were supposed to live in Florida as a landscape architect, and I'm supposed to know these things because I'm working for people that are building stuff, everything's got to be green all the time. It's got to be blooming all the time. It's all about, your St. Augustine sod and azaleas and, as many palm trees as possible. I don't think that that's actually the aesthetic of Florida for Floridians anymore. I think there's an understanding and an embracing of the actual native ecosystems of Florida in terms of environmental, in terms of marsh grasses, and in terms of cypress domes and the other kind of the kind of prairie species. I think there's an appreciation for those that we don't have to be doing Indian hawthorn and azaleas everywhere. And we don't have to have St. Augustine. So in other words, what I'm saying is what, and this is, and I'll tell you where this is manifesting itself. Is it's manifesting itself in the development community. So as an example, our company is working on the master plan for a project called Sunbridge, which is the 30,000-acre Deseret Ranch site, which is east of Lake Nona. And we've been working on that for a long time. And that project is very much about the environment. And we've been working on it for several years now, and I don't think anyone said the word golf course yet. So the idea of actually connecting to Florida's natural systems and having that be a desirable aesthetic to live in as an ideal is actually in the forefront today in a way that the manicured kind of fake landscape, the high irrigation fake landscape of the 1980s and 90s, I think that's actually not in vogue anymore. So I think that there's ways to look at these systems, and even if we want to look at things like storm drainage over here and how we're going to protect that area from an event, I think there's ways to create open space stormwater systems that are environmental, they're recreational. They could serve as a proxy for maybe some redevelopment back there that needs to happen for quality attainable housing and so forth. So I think if we can think in these two ways, with an environmental presence on the things that we do, that we'll be building in the right way. And there's ways to do that. There's things, and to your point about making it too expensive for the housing developer that's the production builder. Yes, there are some things we should put on those developers to do best practices that I don't think are overly burdensome on their product price point. But there's also things that we can be doing in partnership with them. If there's three of those things going in, and there's things that can happen that can help connect all of it, and some of it we can coerce them to do, and some of it, if there's things that New Smyrna is going to do anyway, we can work in the flow with what they're doing.
All right. Next item up is one of the most important ones, and that is public participation. Before that, we're going to take a break, but I do want to get to that roughly about when we had scheduled it, just in case folks are here just for that. So we'll take a break and come back. It's 2:42, so we won't be starting right at 2:45, but somewhere in the 2:50 range, we'll get started up, and we'll start right with public participation. Thank you, everyone, for coming back. We are in the home stretch. This is set to wrap up by about 3:45, 4 at the latest. And that's an important stop date because our city manager has an important afternoon activity to go watch a daughter graduate. So we gotta be out of here by then. So with that, we'll open it up to public participation. We'd ask you just, there's a spot, we've got this mic right here at the end of this table. Happy to have you come up to that. Watch the timer over here. Although I got to say, on my behalf, we'll be give you a little leeway on the time. You've been here for however many hours, so if you got an extra 10 or 15 seconds, I'll give you a little leeway. So same as usual, give your name and address, and yeah. So first up, right here, Brandy.
Creature of habit.
Yeah.
Thank you for that leeway. I want to start off and tell you about where I was born. No. And how much I care. No. First of all, I want to thank for this opportunity. I think it's been one of the more exciting meetings I've been part of, and we've had a lot this year. One thing I would like to comment on is because of the Sunshine Law, you all don't get to meet like this, and it does offer an opportunity not only to talk to each other, but to listen to each other. And I really heard that happening today, and that's really exciting. And I was struck by sort of the irony when Commissioner McGurk said to Commissioner Colodi, we'll have to get together and work on that, and you can't do that. But I think this is one way you can begin to do that process. So that was very exciting, and thanks to the facilitators and the guidance that they gave today. There's so many things, but I'm just going to try to do a few things that struck me. One of the things is that some of the issues that you talked about have been talked about for years. And I felt myself kind of slipping back. Oh, well, I've been to so many meetings, back and back. So, I mean, just a couple. The 3D model has been brought up so many times. I don't know why we just can't ask for it, because it's, for years people have brought it up. It was really a big issue with the Marriott Hotel. I do believe it's something that wouldn't be that difficult to put into operation. It would give us that visual that I think would help in making some of these more difficult decisions. The second was all through the CCR. As you probably know, the Neighborhood Council went through all the data for a full year. There was a lot of data, and I really like your focus on some kind of metric system that helps capture that, because I felt like we worked hard on a lot of that data, and it almost feels like it's somewhere on a shelf and not going to be utilized. But one of the things that came out of that loud and clear was some form of CCR checklist for all our developmental proposals. So does it meet the water quality? Does it meet height? All those kinds of things. That is just kind of a checklist. And I know we've started on some of that already. I think Brian and you all have been working on it, but that certainly came out through the CCR meetings that, you know, we should be doing the sustainable stuff, and we should be having a checklist ahead of the game and not afterwards. You haven't mentioned this one. I suggest you consider making the mayor a 4-year position and increasing the salary. I seriously think, one, it's been great having Mayor Russ, and I think he's just getting going, and he's got to face a re-election campaign, the cost and whatever. So I really hope the city could think about that. I think it would take several years to probably even process it if you want to do
Charter
that.
thing.
That's charter review, and that's coming up. So I really think that might be a great thing for our city, as we are definitely growing, definitely meeting more challenges, and we want to encourage leadership to be with us for a little while to get through some of these complex issues. The other thing that struck me was issues of social justice and communication. As you may know, my background is in mental health, and I have been working a bit with Stuart Marchman about a more continuum of care for our community. Stuart Marchman, as you know, is pulled back due to budgetary. I really want to underline Commissioner McGurk's concern and many others about we do not have a continuum of care for homeless and other people in our community. So I really believe that should be a priority, and of course it goes beyond our city. It goes into counties, region, and state issues, but I think it is definitely something as far as communication. And this next one is a little, I don't know how to quite tackle it, but I do believe, as we talked about Route 1 and redoing that road and the challenges of bringing it into the community in different ways. Living here as long as I have, I also feel and have heard the Route 1 has historically been a racial divide in our community. And we haven't mentioned that. I'm not saying that we do have an overt racial divide, but sometimes I think there is a feel that once you cross Route 1, you're in another part of town and you may not have the same access or accessibility to services and otherwise. So I hope we keep that in mind as we begin to reconstruct one and see how we integrate those two parts of the city. And
You took me serious on the leeway, I guess.
yeah, oh, sorry, is that it? Am I over that much?
You're
Oh,
over so
whoa,
much, yeah.
sorry.
No,
Thank
it's
you.
all good comments, though.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate being here today.
All right, thank you. Others?
My name is Doreen Gruff Coyle, and I live at 1201 South Glencoe. You guys have covered so much today. It's hard to really address any of it in 3 minutes. While I'm not an expert in a lot of things, I am a very creative problem solver. And I think that my community members would say that about me. So I've lived here for 30 plus years, and my vision, as I'm getting into my 70s if I'm still here, is that you come up 44, you don't see a bunch of businesses right up against the road. What you would see is more trees, you would see more creative housing, maybe that's lit up from the road, passive housing. We have tons of architects that do that, lots of information available about what we could do, the costs of which are very significantly low. I think we need to look possibly at the different kinds of builds that we could do. Coming past 44 into New Smyrna, as 95 is crossing 44 last night alone, I noticed that getting off of 95 is already a problem right there. So as we build west of 95, that's something we're really going to have to look at. And public safety, because we have a lot of residents coming here soon. But as you're driving into New Smyrna 44, you might see dome houses. You might see a shark-shaped house, like a passive build that I've seen on YouTube. Really interesting types of things, making New Smyrna an experience beyond just the beach. We have a lot of culture here. One thing we don't have is a huge theater where we can rent it out, a place where we can hold conferences, a place where Florida Theater Conference for the kids could come and rent it and use it. They do it in Tampa right now, but over at the ball field, we just had the marching band competition, which raised a ton of money for our high school and middle school. That's how we effectively used those properties recently. And I think that we could support something like that. I don't think the News Journal Center, if you're going to compare it to something like that, is fair because it was, in my opinion, improperly placed, not the right community. New Smyrna is that community. We are an arts community. We cherish that. People come here for that reason. We need a place where people can perform, where we can rent it to large venues. I spent 12 hours waiting to see Hamilton at Phillips Center, never got a ticket. 12 hours. I was willing to spend $500 a ticket for my daughter's birthday. Sorry, I have a little bit of anxiety when I get up here in front of y'all. But as you come into New Smyrna, some of the attainable building needs to look different. The cost and the materials that we're using now are outdated. We have weather conditions that are worsening, climate change, things that we need to look ahead to try to build better. HUD announced, I think, several meetings ago, I mentioned $635 million coming to Florida for areas that were affected by hurricanes in 2015, 16, and 17. Especially, it said, builds like dome houses, container houses, and things that would not need to be rebuilt, things that are insurable. That's what they're looking to do. Okay, now this one is a big one, and I'm probably not going to be popular for this one, but our island's tiny. I grew up on the south end of it. I watched the ocean come over Grouper Avenue into the river. It's not going to take a huge storm to wipe out a lot of the beachside. You have to think ahead for that. So as far as that goes, we need different builds there. But we don't really need all that driving on the island. Why can't it just be where we ferry people? They do that in other places. Ferries can be aesthetically pleasing. They can hold cars. They can do tours. People who live there would be affected because their property values would shoot way up. People who stay there would be allowed to drive, and people who work there. That would eliminate a lot of traffic and give you a lot of time to work on the infrastructure, which is old and has diminished water quality, backflow, what have you. One answer is not going to be the answer for all areas. I do believe that parking should be encouraged west of 95, whether it be trolley or you pick up a car, the way they do in New York. It has a parking space, you pick up a car, you take it for the day, and you bring it back. If you do that, you get a pass to the beach side. Am I over?
That's over, yes. ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's plenty of
There's a
other
little
time
bit.
to talk about this,
Yep.
but those are some of my ideas, and I really am thankful for you guys for being problem solvers and not complainers.
Thank you. Thanks for being here all day. Yes, ma'am. Come ahead. Wade, you can come on up behind her.
Good afternoon to you all. I'm glad the voters have you all here. It's very encouraging.
You can give your name and address, please.
Barbara Frappier, Edgewater Avenue, New Smyrna Beach.
Okay.
I have a couple of items. I'll go with my first one. Is one of the things that I think this town is lacking and severely needs and would be helpful to all of you is to have a council-appointed conservation commission with regulations that they would create. And a conservation commission would be able to review every project from an environmental perspective, including FEMA guidelines. It would create regulations as to what could be done in proximity to wetlands, buffer zones, and things like that, what could be done in a flood zone. And these regulations would be part and parcel of an application for anyone wanting to build in a flood zone or within, say, 100 feet of other wetlands. And I think that's imperative. Number one, it would help you to get that issue taken care of. There are plenty of people in this community and organizations that are qualified to do wetlands delineations, habitat assessment, and all of those things, and that can assist you in your wildlife corridor connectivity, all of which is important. We read all the time, people complaining because they saw a bobcat in the yard or they saw coyotes walking down the street. They're running out of places to live. So, give them a place to live and give them a place to run. But a conservation commission is one thing that I think is very much lacking in town here. Route 1, I don't know where you are on the franchise-free zone. I was going to send you all a letter and say I think everything west of Route 1 should be franchise-free. I don't want to see Big Joe's turn into Subway. The only thing that is even close to a national place that I ever want to see on Route 1 is Dairy Queen. Thank you very much. I don't want to see the Lost Lagoon turn into Applebee's or any of that. There is something unique about Route 1. I understand Mr. McGurk's comment about the fact of elevating the value of the property for tax benefits, but the sense of you go to Stavros's on Monday and Wednesday, for your half-price pizza. That is what New Smyrna is about. It's unique, and to see Route 1 get trashed like 44 is being trashed with franchises and car dealerships, it just would make me rather ill, because I travel it all the time, and I have to go to Dairy Queen, so I don't want that to go away. I have to go on Tuesday nights.
Appreciate the support.
She's really buttoning you up over there. Yeah.
And the last thing is, I really do wish, plan modifications. When they come before you for plan modifications and variations, I would like them to think that this is not an entitlement or that you have to give it. This is a bargaining chip. Someone comes for a modification or a variance, you need to have the regulations in place to say, well, this, you want that, we need this now. And the last thing is, if you ever have a chance, I'd like you all to take a field trip to Cape Cod. Because New Smyrna Beach is a miniature Cape Cod. All the same problems, all the same attributes. And to get to Cape Cod, there's 2 4-lane bridges. That's it. And you've got tens of thousands of cars that come in the summer and the weekends. And they wait sometimes 4 to 5 hours to get there. So too bad about someone coming from Orlando that's got to wait a little bit in traffic. I have no sympathy, because I've been in Cape Cod. So thank you very much, and thank you for everything you're trying to do. I really this is the most heartening meeting I've been to.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks for being here. She's been here all day, the entire time. As many others have. Wade being one of those.
Wade Mahood, 311 Florida Avenue. First of all, I want to thank the fire chief for his fire hydrant refurbish program. Get the fire hydrants all cleaned up and painted. It right now, at least gives you the impression that they will work if need be, if you should need them in a minute. And I think Colin is the only one in the room that actually say how many of these annual meetings I have attended, whether it's 6 or 8. But I've been. Pardon? No, I didn't. That's where I get my mail, though. But that seat back there is where I get my mail delivered. But a couple, one item I've brought up on a couple of 3 different occasions, and it's not gotten a response to. Actually, is there anybody here in the room now or earlier today from the Utilities Commission? Why not? My question is why not? Because so many things that we discussed, or you all discussed, involve the Utilities Commission and how they affect us. And the city owns the Utilities Commission. And were they invited? But that's my question there. A lot of the discussion was about of course, we're a tourist destination and the traffic it causes. The conversation when it comes to traffic and parking, everything always comes back to the police chief, but nobody has ever mentioned the fact that we're not taking advantage of the other services that are available, like on Highway 44, on weekends, holidays, and during the season on the traffic. Why can't FHP patrol 44 during those times? Because they're on the calendar, and that's when the traffic is. Why can't Volusia County Sheriff's Department help us out with the weekend and holiday beach traffic going to and from the beach, which we have no control over, but that's generating the traffic. And the police chief has to provide the manpower and the enforcement on those areas. And the other thing is on special events. Are the organizers of the special events on Flagler and on Canal Street charged for the, especially on the beach side on Flagler, the parking enforcement after hours? There's a charge for that, and that's the reason they say, well, we don't have, our parking enforcement doesn't work on nights, and some weekends, or in summertime they work the weekends, but that charge should be passed on to the event organizers and to give some financial relief to the police department. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Before the next person, Debbie, can come on up, but I want to just speak to on the Utilities Commission. There's this notion of staying in your lane, and I think that, for many years in the past, I don't know whether they were invited or not, but I get the impression with the current commission that if we had so I get the impression if we, for future events, I like that thought. And so I will make a point personally to reach out to the UC with the city manager and see if they can have someone that's here, not necessarily participating up here, but definitely, as we have staff here. And I get the impression that under this leadership, both the commission and the appointed leadership at the Utilities Commission, they've been happy to have had someone here. So I think that's just something we haven't readdressed since we've got new leadership on that side. So we'll do that, and hopefully that'll come to fruition, because it's a good point. Deb, come on.
Deb Dugas, 200 North Pine Street. I wasn't going to speak, but since you all addressed my delivery truck issue, I felt that I need to thank you for that. I hope it's not the last time I hear of it. And as Wade said, I've been coming to these meetings for many years, and this is probably one of the most informative, best, with the dialogue among the commissioners, and we as citizens appreciate that, because again, we see you up there when you can't really discuss. We appreciate your time and effort. The transparency's been great. I hear a lot from neighbors, my neighborhood. You guys are doing an awesome job, so please keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally.
Sally Gillespie, and I live at 610 North Peninsula. And I certainly echo Dub's congratulations to all of you for a really fine strategic planning session and for the transparency and outreach to the community. I was especially impressed with the facilitator's remarks about the trend in retail and what a huge impact that can have as a plus for our community if we are smart enough now to realize that our very success, as was mentioned earlier by our mayor, is driving up our property values. And although I like that as a homeowner, by the same token, it is putting a squeeze on our small businesses. And as those small businesses find that the property values of the buildings which they are leasing, because very few business owners are actually occupying buildings they own. And so as those prices increase, the small boutiques, the small gift shops cannot sell enough merchandise to make a profit, much less pay the escalating rent cost. There are strategies that can be used by cities, that have been used by cities, whereby the city does offer some subsidies of sorts to make up the differential between the escalating cost of rent and the home and the landlord's very real obligation that he feels or she feels to the community. But there is a point where that landlord doesn't feel that he or she should be paying that much money. And we're on the cusp of that because what we see, you talked about quantifying, and I'm not sure that we don't need to quantify what I'm saying. But I'm seeing more businesses on Canal Street going to professional office space. I'm seeing, for my view, too many bar-oriented places in other historic commercial districts. And so you are diminishing the attraction of our small business community if we lose our diversity and if we price our small businesses out of their ability to retain them. I think as you prioritize what we have to do immediately, because this is happening quickly, I think you do need to quantify this trend that is strictly subjective on the part of the coalition, but I think is a real issue that every city like ours has faced and usually fails. The cycle usually is the businesses go out, the small businesses go in, ultimately the professionals go to new office buildings with fiber optics and parking, and then we have empty storefronts. I think we can get ahead of that curve. In closing, let me thank the staff, our city manager, the facilitators, and all of you for talking with us individually, for inviting us to your table, and for the very thoughtful consideration you have given to the many challenges we have. Godspeed and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Sally. The only thing I would say to that is it's not our table. It is our table. It's your table as well. Yes, Wade. I'm sorry. Jim.
Steve Simpson.
Steve, dear Lord.
315 North Causeway. Let me start out by saying, as others have said, I attended this same meeting last year. 2 positive comments immediately. 1, the seats here are much more comfortable than in the Brannon Center. My backside is not numb.
That is true.
2, the facilitation, thanks to these guys, they have done a great job of kind of bringing everything together. Yes, we see some of the same topics that we saw last year, but you jumped into those topics and you started covering them. Last year, we were going every different direction before you really got into, let's talk about what's going on. One that I must point out, and I know that Randy has a little issue here of the communication and trust. That was a big issue last year. I think the community feels very positive that they have the trust of this commission, that things are going the right direction, and they feel good about that. So I think it's happening. You, amongst yourselves, have kind of agreed that that's the case, and I will echo that 100% from my perspective, that everything is communicated, it's out in the open, and we have trust. And we do trust this commission to do the right thing for us. So your discussion was good today. You've got some very good topics. I did like the question that says, okay, what's the deliverables for this session? Well, you guys, and I'm sorry for using the word guys, but you commissioners need to know what those deliverables are so that you can take action on those. You need to take them, develop your priorities, some action items, so that you can move forward with those. So I totally encourage for you to have routine workshops like this so you can have dialogue and discuss those issues and have to say about them, rather than amongst yourselves is what are our issues. I love the idea of these developmental issues that are coming along, and let's have it all defined before a developer comes before us and says, you've already had the opportunity to establish. Totally encourage you to have more workshops like this.
Thank you, Steve. Or Jim or Wade or whatever your name is. Any other members of the public? Public participation, and go to kind of closing and next steps. I don't know what you had in mind. I've meant to talk to you, but I'd love to just any kind of next steps. So yeah, so we'll just kind of go around the horn. We'll just start at that. So not rehashing everything, but if there's a particular comment that resonated or something that we missed that you want to slide in at the last minute, probably won't have time to dive into it, but we can at least get it on the radar. One thing I'll lead off with is that the comment was just made. I couldn't agree more, and I think the facilitators have done fantastic, so this is no slight to them by any stretch with what I'm about to say, but I would like to see us this coming year in 2020. We had a lot of extra meetings this past year. I would like to have a few more that are like this, it's really just us, and the agenda's kind of open, and it's controlled by the commission. Staff isn't, they're here to listen, but it's us and our chance to kind of have some of these, that dialogue we had about, well, what do you mean when you say that? Because we take pot shots at a lot of stuff from up here, and we don't have time to get into it because we have an agenda, and you got to go through the whole thing. So I think that's been extremely helpful for me this time. I think the public that resonated as well. So I'd love to see us do more of this in 2020, where we just come in and say, hey, here's what's on my mind, or hey, I want to go back to what you said here. Let's talk through that, and because this is our one chance. I can't call you all and do that like we would in a normal business setting. So I'd like to see us do more of that. So hopefully, if things come up here, we can we make a list for some of our first meeting in 2020 that we do that. So with that, I'll turn it over, Jake, if you want to lead off. Any closing comments?
Just a quick one. I think you're so right. We get slammed with agendas for needs of a lot of growth. That can be a good thing. But to have that time to sit down and talk and hash things out and come to compromises on and things that we hopefully agree upon. If we don't take that time, we're always going to be behind the eight ball. It'd be nice as the leaders that we're supposed to be that we can lead and not, be playing catch up all the time. So that free time, free play time would be great for me. I think you all might agree. I know it's extra time out of our lives, but we owe it to our city that we love.
Okay. Randy, any closing comments on today?
I was originally apprehensive about this because I've been through 2 or 3 of them, and they all seem to go the same way. I'm encouraged by the way that this meeting has gone. I certainly think that the more opportunity that we have to sit and talk amongst ourselves will benefit everyone, all of us, including the community. And to your point, knowledge is a great thing. I think the more of it that we have, target, measurable points, data, you can't go wrong with any of those types of things. It helps you to make a better decision. So I certainly would encourage those kinds of things. And I'm looking forward to the finished product.
Yeah. Commissioner McGurk.
Well, I've done this a few times, and I agree with what Randy just said. I was a little dubious about this. I think we made some progress here today, specifically because we got into some of the issues a little bit. I like the dialogue that I had with Mike, and I like to have specifics. What I was hoping to come out of here with 3 or 4 specific issues that we can have and drill down into and actually work on, like housing subdivisions, kind of like that discussion we started to get into. I don't think we got there enough, but I think we made big steps to that. So I agree that continuing to have some of these kinds of meetings where we can sit here, put some coffee and snacks on the table, and just get into a discussion with each other about what we're hearing from our constituents, and then what we can do and can't do, and the ramifications of what changes we do make. It's very important for then us to make those decisions and communicate them to the people. And the second thing I like that came out of this meeting today is I think we should move forward on the communication issue on social media that has been brought up a few times, and I think that we should, I don't want to have another discussion on that. I think our next discussion on that is let's see what it looks like on paper and let's start acting on that, because the more information that we can get out to the people on their medium, what they're using, which is Facebook and Nextdoor, the better off we're all going to be and be able to do the people's work. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
I look forward to getting the final report and hope that it focuses on, let's say, 4 to 6 of the main issues up there. However, the consultant feels best to consolidate them. And for each of those issues, I would like to see some type of action, direction that we can take. And we can then prioritize what we want to do. I would like to see 3 or 4 more of these sessions during the coming year. And I would like the format to be that we take one of the 4 or 6 main topics, spend half a day on that so we could really get down into some more details on it. And then the rest of the time, we can address issues that have come up along the way. But no, this worked out better than I thought it would, so I'm happy. What can I say?
That is high praise coming from.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's as good as I've heard so far. So yeah, you should put that one on your website. It's 5-star review from Commissioner Colodi.
They were mad. Most of you haven't seen the responses I gave when they asked for the comments.
I've got them.
6 they're extensive, so I like the way it went. It's very good.
So, couple of things. Number one is, we're always looking forward, and so I think it's worth pausing to just highlight. We did this last year, and I said leading off, as I looked back at my notes from last year, I was proud of that we did make progress on a lot of things in an environment that wasn't the easiest to do. We have new leaders sitting around this table. We've been in constant transition throughout that. So I want to commend staff. If you look at the document created last year, I think we took a very different direction. I think many of the comments made by the citizens were correct. I think we went in a better direction this year. But the reality is, last year we did come up with a work plan or document that said these are things we want to focus on as a commission and as a community. And I think staff has done a good job of, since April, I think is when we finally approved that. They've been working off of the document. They've been doing what we directed them to do, and they've been making good strides and headway towards that. And that's apparent. So I guess, as we look forward, and we're already planning next year, I want to make sure we pause and acknowledge that, that good work and that good effort. And it's because of that I'm heartened that this isn't just going to be, the easiest thing in the world to do is, in government is to, say you've taken action because you've talked about something and formed a committee. And that's the easy way out. So I'm hopeful that we can, challenge ourselves and our staff to continue to, have metric-driven measurements and actually be able to say, no, we've made real progress. We can point to real things, and we've made real progress. And I think we did that last year, and I'm confident we'll continue to do it. I had one other topic for 2020 that I think is strategic, but it's very different than everything else we've talked about. And we're not going to have time to dive into it today. And I was waiting on the right moment, and there really was no right moment. But I want to talk about race in New Smyrna Beach. And I think over the past year, as I came into this role, it settled in on me in a way that it never really had before. I had people approaching me with comments and reaching out to me with things that I was wasn't aware of, tensions that I didn't know were there, frankly. So I don't know. I don't have answers in this space. I'll be completely candid. But I don't think not addressing elephants in the room, not addressing things, doesn't help make it better. And I attended at the Mayor's League of City event this past year, attended a presentation done by the leadership of Palatka, Florida. And they talked about a program they had done, and it was really fascinating. And they made a ton of progress by just getting leaders in the community around the table and just kind of getting it all out there, saying, here's how I feel, here's the reality that I feel, here's my perception, here's the reality that I feel. And I don't believe as a community that we're going to move past some things. I think there will always be some undercurrents if we don't start having what will be a difficult conversation. And frankly, as leaders, sometimes we don't like to even say some of these words because it's such a polarizing thing. Sometimes it feels like you can step in it at any given moment, and so you weigh every word very carefully. But I think we have to get beyond that. I think we have to move beyond that and be willing to be vulnerable and put ourselves out and say we want to have the conversation. We want to address this because, frankly, I am weary of having folks standing up in our commission meetings and saying, their perception is that things are different in their neighborhood than other neighborhoods. And I don't know whether it's reality or not. I can't speak to the reality because I've never walked a mile in their shoes, but I can speak to the fact that it means enough to them to stand up and say it. And so if that's the case, I think we have to do more to address that. And you can do that in many ways, but I think it starts with a conversation. It also starts with data, and there's other elements that play into this. So it's something, again, I'm just kind of putting it out there as I'm opening this up as a community, as leadership. It's something I want to tackle in 2020, not because I think I have it all figured out, but because I think it's important enough, and I think as a community it's important enough for us to talk about. And I don't think it's going to be easy, but I think it's something we have to start that dialogue. We have to start that conversation, and I think we've made progress. I talked last year at an event about building bridges, and truly that's from the bottom of my heart, that's what I want to do is build bridges in our community that haven't existed before. And I've made efforts this year to do that, made connections and attended events and gave speeches and different things. But so again, I don't have it all. I don't know all the right things, but I know that other communities have addressed this head on, and what I heard was it made a difference. And so I would like to see New Smyrna doing that same thing. So I don't know what that looks like, but know that it's something I plan on starting to bring up more and helping lead us through what I hope is making progress in that area. So, but as far as what we've discussed today, this notion of having more routine workshops, completely agree with that. I like the idea of just, again, we don't need facilitators. We don't even need staff to spend hours preparing an agenda. I think we just need to come together and talk and say, here's what's on my mind, and so that was my closing thoughts.
Then
see if he's got any comments.
Closing comments.
I just want to say one thing, that the strategic plan was one on top of my goals. I cannot tell you how happy I am to see the discussion on the table, because I could tell you the department head sitting in the audience, I'm glad they're here to listen. They're all eager to have a clear directions of where we're going for the 2020 and beyond. A lot of these items that we discussed, the department directors have mentioned them. One thing I want to just maybe put a light on, the 44, when I talked to Pete, I guess at the meetings that we had with him, 44, as the mayor mentioned, is two segments from Mission to 95, and that's kind of all infill. But you take from 95 on, I think, because my wife always asks me, why do you have so many gas stations there? I don't have an answer for her. But I think it's, if we could maybe draw some guidelines or some regulations where you could have a bar has to be 1,000 feet from a church, maybe we need to limit the number of, say, for example, gas stations. Have the guidelines of what we want to see on 44. So this way we have the opportunity to actually draw the picture from 95 all the way to the city limits, because that is a bare land out there. And without having that, I think it's going to be exactly what happened to the first section. But I think we need to come up with some maybe more strict regulations if it's legally okay. I mean, that's the only comment that I could make, because other stuff we talked about, but this is, I think it's very important, because it's going to set the stage for the city for the next 10 years. And that is coming whether we like it or not. And I just want to thank the citizens who attended the community workshops, and special thanks to Sally and her group. They provided the white paper, very detailed, a lot of good information in it, and I think Pete has expressed the same thing that I thought about it. So thank you, Sally, and thanks for everybody who attended, especially Wade. Wade, by the way, he attended probably more meetings than anybody in this room, so under his chair there is $100.
Everybody, check under your chair.
All right. Thanks, Khaled. Good comments.
This has been amazing. We're right on schedule. Thanks for the good thoughts. Laura and I have enjoyed it, and Tom Kohler and Natalie and Andrew McCown and other people that have been in the meetings. So it is always great to work with the team here. What I would say is, in terms of pulling together a product, I actually think that there's some pretty clear sort of thematic topics with some well-articulated sort of guiding ideas about what we really want the outcome to be on that topic. And so the first thing that we want to do is we want to try to capture that. Because I'm not sure that, I don't know what's everything that's been written in the past, but I think that there are some clear philosophical and aspirational based things that we want to move the city in a certain direction, and we can record that and write it down. And then I think beyond that, I think there are a set of key, as I think you said, Commissioner McGurk, under each of these topics, there are clearly 3 or 4 kind of subtopics that are really driving the discussion. And we need to articulate those, and we need to then start to talk about these starter ideas and some ideas about metrics. And then I think in terms of one of the things we talked about, I think very early on in this is, you didn't want a big to-do list, and yet if you don't have some things to do, how do you get anything done? So I think what we want to do on that front, there are some to-do items and some starter ideas on some of these sheets. So we'll clearly articulate those, but I think we want to work that through Khalid and his team to kind of flush out some of those things and kind of ground truth some ideas for some starter actions that you can take. And so what I'm envisioning is a product that talks about the big picture vision, what your sort of goals and objectives are for those strategic elements, some things that you need to be paying attention to or some things that you can start to act on, and then ideas about measures. And I think we can pull that together. I don't want to say easily, because nothing's easy. But I see a straight line to pull that together if we can just sit down and do some work and compile all the input that we've received and some ideas that we have and so forth. So, anything else?
We just touched on timeline. I know you've got the
Sure.
last slide was, you got kind of January,
Sure.
February, but just kind of what's the next?
Yeah, I think what we'd like to do is we're going to get this into some outlines next week. And then I think in probably the first half of January, try to get a draft report together that we can actually review with Khalid and staff and start to flush out a little bit more on sort of the action side. And I'd like to have a draft to you by the end of the month in January. End of January, beginning of February, have something that you can look at.
Yeah.
So, okay?
Yeah, last time, what happened last time was we ended up with a document that then came back to us, and then we had changes, and we only meet so often, so it ended up being, again, April before we kind of got this final approved product.
Right.
I'd like to, and that wasn't on staff, that was more on a lot of back and forth with us. So, I think the faster we can kind of get it, in the swing of things, or at least start working on some items.
Yeah, I think if we can get to where, maybe that's a conversation we can have, but I think that as we generate draft products, like a first outline, for instance, how we want to share that, I think we can, talk about how to sort of do it in waves, if that helps. So, okay.
All right. Thank you all. Hang on, wait.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Yes, let me.
We'll give it to Phil to the PO. We'll get it posted.
Yeah.
So good comment, Wade. All right. Thank you all.
It's on there now.
Thanks for being here. Meeting adjourned.